So welcome everybody, day 14 of this fantastic book, Change Your Question, Change Your Life. So since we did chapter 8 yesterday, day before yesterday, we will be looking at tool number 8, which is an exercise for chapter 8. So tool number 8, create learner teams. See chapter 8, learner teams and judger teams, pages 99 to 111. Purpose: to learn about the benefit of applying question thinking and the learner-judger distinction to teams as well as to organizations. Discussion. In chapter 8, Joseph uses the choice map to explain the difference between learner teams and judger teams. Ben realizes that learner teams are far more effective than judger ones are. He begins to consider ways of turning his judger team into a learner team. The experience of working on teams can be challenging, and people often deal with these difficulties in judger ways. They might stop listening, trying to push their own agenda, or just blame others when things don't work out. They could go judger on themselves by assuming they have nothing to contribute, by shutting down, and or by not fully engaging. Whatever is the case, nobody wins. By introducing the notion of learner teams, each participant can follow guidelines to suspend judger and simply step into learner, which has a positive effect on everyone's productivity and results. Practice number 1. Ask people to compare their experiences of learner teams versus judger teams. You can also ask people to think of times they've been on teams that have worked well when they have been able to contribute their best strengths to the tasks at hand, and teams when they haven't. Then simply ask them to describe the difference in terms of experience, productivity, and results. So it's very important to sit with your team and ask them to check jab calm productivity or experience was fantastic, what happened? And when things did not move, it was a bad meeting, bad day, everything bad, 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 bad. क्या हुआ था? And what is the difference? Practice number 2. Print out copies of the choice map and give one to each team member. Lead a discussion about the impact of learner and judger mindsets for the team. Include the notions of judger cost and judger standoff in your conversation. Then introduce the importance of a learner alliance. See page 107 to 108 and discuss what it would take for your team. Commit to create a learner alliance where everybody gets together to become a learner. It's there in chapter 8. And practice number 3, ask people on your team to generate guidelines based on the choice map about how to best communicate and collaborate during meetings. So if you can get your team to make the agenda of any meeting in a question format without being a judger. So learner questions. If your agenda of a meeting can turn into learner questions, like what Saurabh was saying, that is how you create a breakthrough meeting and a breakthrough learner alliance team. So practice these 3 practices with your team. Take multiple copies of these choice maps, distribute with your team members, distribute it in your house, and then start the dialogue regarding this. So after the tool, chapter 9, when the magic works. Over breakfast, a few days later, Grace told me about what had happened with Jennifer, the young woman she'd been having so much trouble with at work. Grace even apologized for calling me during that day just to vent. I kept the choice map on my desk all day, Grace said. Two learner questions kept jumping out at me. What do I want? And what are my choices? When I applied those questions to Jennifer, I realized I wanted her to start showing more common sense and initiative. So I tried some new questions. I asked myself, why does Jennifer need so much direction from me? I became truly curious after I realized I didn't know. Was she afraid of acting on her own, or worried that I'd fire her for making a mistake? I also wondered whether she had more going for her than I'd given her credit for. The next time she came to me for help, I asked her a question instead of just giving her instruction. I inquired, how would you solve this problem if you were the boss? That single question opened up a very productive conversation. Jennifer confessed that she was indeed afraid of me. She thought if she didn't do exactly what I expected her to do, I'd fire her. This is what had happened with her previous boss, and she didn't want it to ever happen again. That talk changed everything between us. She said she felt better about talking initiative and working on her own. She also came up with some good ideas for solving her own problems. She was obviously very pleased with herself. I congratulated her and told her how happy I was that we had our talk. I'm really surprised and glad. And you know what? Asking learner questions made me feel a lot better at the end of the day. I realize now I was being unfair to Jennifer. I had been assuming she was asking all those questions because she was incompetent. She really isn't. It's just that she believed she had to check everything out with me before acting on her. And this is what happens to majority of us. एक एक्सपीरियंस हमारा ऐसा होता है जहां पे कुछ एडवर्स सिचुएशन में things do not turn out the way we wanted it to be. वो मेमोरी को हम चेप लेते हैं अपने ऊपर, and the next time it's not we the true self who's enacting, it is that chepod memory that is at play. So she got, if we talk about the example here, since the assistant Jennifer had got fired by her ex-boss because of not taking into considerations what the boss wanted. वो मेमोरी चेप उसने वो मेमोरी चेप ली कि बॉस तो ऐसे ही होते हैं. सो द नेक्स्ट बॉस wants to check everything. अपनी creativity absolutely down. The boss became irritated because she's not used to that. So everybody is operating from their own perspective of their past memories in the current situations. So when we approach things from past memories, but with a learner mindset, the first question that changes everything, what is it that I need to learn? And then the powerful question which she asked, how would you solve this problem if you were in my position? And this works wonders, especially when you're working with your team in terms of work. If there is a problem, if there is an issue that needs to be resolved, ask them for the solution. and then ask them from whatever options you get. And if you have an option which could be a potential solution, share that also. But that sharing has to be again in a question format. So suppose, for example, you are discussing about some issue to be resolved, कोई customer का issue है, कुछ भी है, कोई new product है, whatever is the issue. First ask, what is it that I need to learn? Get yourself aligned to the learner mode. Very clear. Intention डाल के get yourself aligned to the learner mode. Practice learner questions in your mind. Approach the meeting with the right intention of being in that learner mindset zone and ask, how would you solve it? आपके पास क्या ऑप्शन, आपके हिसाब से क्या कैसे सॉल्व कर सकते हैं? Ask the team members for what their opinion. You will also have a point of view, but you will not give your point of view till the time you do not listen to what exactly they have. And if you are convinced with their point of view, ask them, you've chosen this, now इसके लिए आपको क्या करना है, आप वो करो. If you are convinced. Just in case if you are not convinced and you want to put your point across, how do you do that? You cannot now just say, नहीं, इसको ऐसे कर लो. Then that is from a statement point of view, from a judge's point of view. Now in that situation, you have to come up with the question, can this also be a potential solution? And then wait for their feedback. Yeah, Saurabh.
So I've been trying to do this for since this book's been started, and there have been instances where I've asked solutions from my team members, and slowly they have started giving solutions, and I've realized it's a wonderful way to keep your ego at bay.
तेरी voice
Otherwise,
बहुत ज्यादा.
you sometimes are
Voice is cracking
taking
बहुत
basically
ज्यादा.
your ego taking a decision for them.
Come again. We could not listen. The voice was cracking. Come again.
So hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been trying to do this since this book started.
Great.
Is it better now?
Yeah. Audible.
So yeah. So there have been instances where whatever solutions they've been giving, when I've asked them, okay, you chalk out you chalk out a solution for this, and whatever solutions they've been giving, and which to me internally have been making no sense at all, and but I've been trying to take more alternative solutions, and it's come down to the point where I've realized that it's actually it was a lot of ego, which was taking the decisions within me rather than myself, and when I'm asking them for solutions, and even if I want a particular solution, now it's come to a point where we'll
Voice cracking
have to
again.
discuss about
Voice is cracking
this.
again.
Maybe we'll have to talk to the customer before we give them a solution like this. So
It works. And just in case you also want to, whatever solution you have thought about, you also want to share it, rather than saying कि ऐसे करो, say, I also have a possibility. I don't know whether it works or it does not work, बट मेरा माइंड कह रहा है कि इसको ऐसे भी किया जा सकता है. बाकी आप लोग बेटर जज हो, आप देखो क्या ये हमारे को सूट करेगा कि नहीं करेगा. Because
so
the time the other person
so
does not grab that choice, it's not his baby.
Yeah, so it's come to a point in a couple of situations where I've asked them that okay, these couple of solutions जो आप बोल रहे हो ठीक है accepted, but क्या हम ये solution दे सकते हैं? And they've said कि सर ये सोल्यूशन तो बिल्कुल ही ऑफ ट्रैक है, एंड पर फिर भी हम इसको एक बार कस्टमर से बात करते हैं कि क्या ये सोल्यूशन हो भी सकता है कि नहीं।
Hmm,
तो अगर ये हो सकेगा तो उनको देके देखेंगे।
hmm,
And I'm like, yeah, actually, it was my ego which was actually pushing me towards a solution
hmm.
to this problem. When actually, if you take the ego out of the picture, then it was nothing. So that has been a good realization over the course of this chapter, or this
Matlab,
book.
whatever you want, it has to come from them as if it's their baby. Because वो ownership तभी आएगी, वो responsibility तभी आएगी जब या उसका solution हो या he accept, हाँ ये मुझे ठीक लग रहा है. The moment he grabs that, he will not spoil his baby.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
Great. I'm really surprised and glad. And you know what? Asking learner questions made me feel a lot better at the end of the day. So we did this. Okay. As Grace told me the story of her breakthrough with Jennifer, I was relieved. She didn't ask me about any results I had gotten from working with Joseph ideas. It's true, I had some shifts in my thinking and was somewhat hopeful rather than resigned. But I didn't have much to show for my efforts yet. And my team was still a nightmare. When I finally left home, I was at least 20 minutes late. Traffic was piling up on the freeway. A mile past my on ramp, the highway turned into a parking lot. Cars were lined up as far as I could see, 4 lanes wide. I was getting frantic. I didn't even notice how much my judger mindset had kicked in, at least not right away. Then traffic stopped completely. I gritted my teeth, set the car in park, and pulled out my cell phone to check for messages. My secretary had left several reminders, which did nothing to lessen my stress. I was already anxious about that morning meeting with Alexa and was dreading the one with Charles that afternoon. I wasn't ready for either, at least of all the latter. I slapped the steering wheel in frustration, muttering something about how one guy, stupid enough to run out of gas, had ruined the whole day for half the city. Who was the idiot responsible? I didn't need this. Didn't he realize? I suddenly stopped myself. I was solidly in judger. I actually laughed out loud. Then I heard sirens, and an ambulance sped along the emergency lane towards the front of the line. Accident. I switched on the radio for traffic news. 2 people badly injured. I felt pretty foolish about jumping to the conclusion that some jerk had ran out of gas. As I sat in my car fuming, worries about my meeting with Charles kept intruding. My thoughts were going round and round. Fueled by my anger with him, I sure needed help with this one. What would Joseph tell me? I heard his voice in my head, reminding me how important it is to change my questions, especially with Charles and my team. Yesterday, he told me to find a real situation to test out what I had been learning. This upcoming meeting with Charles was about as real as it gets. But what learner questions would help me get out of what Grace called a judger head? What learner questions could help Charles and me get off to a good start? Traffic suddenly moved forward 100 yards or so before it stopped again. In those few moments, I realized I had already stepped onto the switching lane with the questions I had just asked myself. Joseph kept suggesting that whenever I caught myself in judger, I should stop, take a deep breath, and go into observer to find out what I was asking myself at that moment. I repeat, this is very important to check yourself. Joseph kept suggesting that whenever I caught myself in judger, I should stop, take a deep breath, and go into the observer to find out what I was asking myself at that moment. I did that. The first one that popped into my mind was about traffic jam. How can I get out of here? Obviously, there wasn't much choice about that. I was stuck until traffic started moving again. Then something else Joseph said came back to me. I don't have much control over what happens, but I can choose how I relate to what happens. Again, very important, guys, please pay attention. I don't have much control over what happens, but I can choose how I relate to what happens. That choice is always with you. Almost immediately, a new question came to mind. How can I make best use of this time? It took only a second to come up with an answer to that one. I fished my wallet out of my pocket, took out Joseph's business card, and punched his number into my cell phone. He answered immediately. Ben, here, I said, you have a minute. I'm stuck in traffic and going a little nuts. Joseph was silent for a moment, then laughed. Did you try saying, beam me up, Scotty? How would you know I was such a trekkie? I laughed too, and almost instantly my mood lightened. I've got a meeting with Charles this afternoon, I explained. I realize I have to get into learner mindset. To even have a chance of it going well, I'm worried that I'll blow it. Where do I begin? Good question, Joseph said. Can you write something down? Sure, I said, go ahead. As I sat there, stalled in traffic, Joseph dictated 3 questions. What assumptions am I making? How else can I think about this? And what is the other person thinking, feeling, and wanting? Joseph explained that these questions were from his top 12 questions for success, one of the tools in the work. I looked at the first question, what assumptions am I making? That was easy enough. Where Charles was concerned, my assumptions were unavoidable. I had beaten him up out of a big promotion. Guys in that position can be dangerous. I'd be a fool to drop my guard with him. I was sure nothing would make Charles happier than to see me fail. I was also sure he'd do whatever he could to make that happen. Then he could step into my position and have what he wanted. Who wouldn't assume you had to watch your back with guys like that?